Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. How is everyone doing? I am clearly sick, still have severe flu. I'm just showing up here for some good works. I know a lot of Christians don't believe in doing works, but here we are, right? Let's get started. Yes. Hmm.
So it's in the evening. He's arrested in the evening. He's had his last supper.
Mm-hmm.
He goes out and prays. The figure of the boy in the park is in Mark 14.
Yep.
And it's only in Mark, and it's a strange passage.
Very strange.
Yeah. So it'd be nighttime.
And then the next day, about 8 hours later, roughly around 8 hours, he's crucified. He dies, and he dies early.
Well, it depends which gospel you read. In
Okay.
Mark, he gets crucified at 9 in the morning.
Okay.
In John, he doesn't get crucified until in the afternoon.
Right. And he's crucified. Who were the guys that were crucified in each?
So this is one of the point of contention where the gospels disagree, and I'm sure people say this is a divine word of God and divinely inspired, and these are from 3 or 4 different people's narration, so they ought to have a certain amount of differences in it. But these are the basic details which a person should get right, because these news were spreading like fire. It was a very closely knit community. People used to see and witness someone going somewhere or doing something. So these are the things that people should have gotten right.
Each side of him. What were their charges?
We're not told in the New Testament. There are later legends that deal with them.
Okay.
Where they're actually, yeah. But
so we have no idea what they were crucified for, or what's the consensus, scholarly consensus?
Well, there's not. So people were crucified for a variety of reasons, and I guess I haven't really looked around to see what the consensus would be. But my suspicion is that they also were accused of some kind of insurrection things. Because normally the people who'd be crucified tended to be the complete people at the very lowest level of the social scale. So slaves, if slaves did something nasty, they'd get crucified. But the Romans, the Romans are basically crucifying people that they see as a threat. And so probably Jesus is crucified for calling himself the king of the Jews.
Mm.
And that is the problem where Romans never crucified someone. They couldn't care less about Judaism. But if someone used to threaten the emperor and call himself an emperor or king, or as Jesus was deemed by Jewish Sadducees and Pharisees and lawmakers, that was the reason why he was crucified. They had no problem with him being calling himself God of Jews and stuff like that. So yeah, that was totally a fake thing.
In all the Gospels, right? It's like the unanimous thing in the Gospels. And so the problem is that the Romans are ruling Israel. And so if he calls himself the king, he's saying that he's the ruler of Israel. And so they don't like that. They crucify people like that.
Okay.
So it may be that they're called the problem is in the Gospels, they're called a word that's often translated robbers. The Greek word is leistes. Leistes, though, in Josephus, the Jewish historian Josephus, uses the term leistes to refer to guerrilla warriors, people engaged in guerrilla warfare. And so if that's what it means...
When was he?
First century.
First.
Yeah. So he talks about people Yeah, he's our main source for information about first century Judaism. And by the way, it doesn't say much about drugs.
Didn't Julius Caesar also call the men who kidnapped him when he was a child lay stace, and he crucified them as well?
I don't recall.
So if Jesus was in the park with a kid, I hate that.
Can you please just
So what is it? So what does it occur? What does the passage say?
Mark 14:48. Jesus answered and said to him, have you come upon me as a lay stace with swords in order to arrest me?
Right. So like
Swords
out
and
of all the
clubs to arrest
definitions
me.
we have, obviously he's not saying, why are you pulling up on me like I'm a pirate? Like, why would you be a pirate at 1 a.m.?
Yeah,
with
or a robber. It's talking about being an insurrectionist.
an insurrectionist?
Yeah. Why else would soldiers come after him? It's not for, you don't send a band of soldiers after somebody's stolen a loaf of bread.
Right. Why are you coming up to me like I'm a lay stace?
Yeah, that's it.
What am I stealing here? You know, it is weird that he's with the
No, it's
kid.
not
though.
stealing. It's here. It's not that he's stealing something. It's that they're arresting him for being an insurrectionist.
Right.
And the way you know that is because they arrest him, they put him on trial for being an insurrectionist.
Right.
So that's why they're arresting him.
Right.
Not for being a robber and not for being a pirate.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but I'm not sure what the kid has to do with that.
Yeah, me neither.
So the kid is only in Mark, but it's a strange story because it's this, they try and grab the guy and
They pull his towel
this
off.
young man is not, no, he's wearing a linen cloth. He's wearing like a robe or something, a linen robe. And they grab him and it says he's wearing a linen robe over his nakedness. They grab for him. They
What
only
was the
get
word for it again? Sindon.
Yeah. Okay. Good enough. And so they grab it and he runs away buck naked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It's Mark 14:62. And so the question is, what in the world is that all about?
Right.
And people have different theories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ahmed has a theory.
Oh God. So does Morton. So does Morton Smith. Do you know about Morton?
No.
Oh my God. Well, you should be interested in Morton Smith. So Morton, have you ever heard of? And he wrote 2 big books on this thing. And the reason it caused a big uproar is because he argued that this passage in Mark 14:62 about the young man running away with just a linen cloth over his nakedness is actually referred to in this secret gospel.
Sorry.
And that it suggests that this is a young man that Jesus had baptized in the nude, because they baptized people in the nude, and then had spent the night with him, teaching him the mysteries of the kingdom of God.
Jesus.
And,
come on, Jesus. We can do better.
Oh no, he thought he was doing pretty well according to this version. And so other scholars accept as authentic.
Sure. Well, I mean, it is I can imagine how that's frowned upon by most people.
Yeah, most people didn't like that,
especially if they're theological scholars.
But the thing is,
his theory, the drug theory of what's happening in the park is Jesus was participating in the mystery.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the evidence of it?
Right.
And what's the evidence that he's drinking venom?
One of the things that you've written about a lot is the idea of the virgin birth story, the Immaculate Conception.
Mm-hmm. Those are different things. The virgin birth refers to Jesus' mother, who conceived as a virgin.
Right.
The Immaculate Conception has to do with how his mother was born. She was born, God did a miracle. Her mother was not a virgin, but the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception is that when Mary was conceived, unlike every other human being, she was conceived without a sin nature.
Oh, okay.
So her mother did not pass on the sin nature to Mary. That became a later doctrine to show why Jesus did not inherit a sin nature from his mother.
Okay.
So the Immaculate Conception isn't about the birth of Jesus. It's about the birth of his mother.
about the birth of his mother.
Yes.
Okay. And where does this idea come from? Like, where are they getting this?
Well, where does any theologian come up with their ideas? And so the earliest accounts of Jesus' mother are in a book called It's called the Proto Gospel of James, and it is a early 2nd century book. And it actually doesn't even mention the Immaculate Conception yet. In this account, it is an account of Mary's birth, and it's a miracle.
So yeah, guys, there is a gospel, an account which is Proto-Evangelium of James, and it says pretty nasty things about. Let me. Check. So I go through my. Notes relating to Proto Gospel of James. I'm gonna put this. Have a read whenever you guys can. Where a lot of people have had sightings of Miriam, as we call, or Mary in English, where it's described a lot of supernatural events of Virgin Mary having appeared to people, typically with a message or a call to devotion. And these events are primarily associated with Roman Catholic tradition and often lead to the establishment of pilgrimage sites. So there are some supernatural events, there are messages and calls to actions, the pilgrimage sites are there. And a few examples of them would be, I would say, there is, let me put it here. That's as far as I can remember. There is an incident in 1920 or 1917, somewhere like that, with Fatima, 3 children in Fatima, Portugal. Uh, they saw Virgin Mary, and there were some messages and prophecies received. And there was another one of a young peasant girl in France in 1858. where Virgin Mary revealed to herself her identity as the Immaculate Conception. There's also another one in Juan Diego in 1531. An indigenous peasant saw Virgin Mary near the hill of Mexico. And there are other notable apparitions. If you guys can go and look, you'll definitely find them. And those are believed to have some significance and impact in terms of religious devotion, faith, and converting people, pilgrimages, and obviously spiritual growth. So there is, healing and closer connection to Mary, Catholics attributing miracles and graces to her, all of these things. Not all of the, apparitions are proof. There are some which are personal faith and, you know, can't take everyone's word for it. But usually, the main thing is that there have been such things. There are visual encounters. They often contain messages for prayer, repentance, faith. Sometimes they're linked to, miraculous healings, weeping statues, or solar phenomena. Excuse me. Mostly are reported by Catholics, and the church investigates them for authenticity. The one which is kind of not my thing to do. I'm a very I don't know. Don't want to say it, but there is a lactation one. If you guys can look that up, lactation of Saint Bernard. I'm gonna put that on. So yeah, there is one where is lactation of Saint Bernard, where Mary is believed to have miraculously squirted her breast milk into his mouth, and you know it can have a symbolic meaning. It can be a mystical allegory, from medieval theologians and artists and stuff, displaying nourishing Mary's maternal role, or something like that. But not appropriate to say things like that, anyways. And also, I would say, if you look at Gospel of James, you would find that parents of Mary were Joachim and Anna. And if you look at Eusebius's history, I think in Church History, Book 3, you'd see chapter 6, the famine which oppressed them. It says that her father was Eliezer. Excuse me. So I'm going to put those references in there just for the sake of stream. So let's do it this way. So you guys can see both of these together. Anyways, moving on.
Miracle, because God gets her pregnant, even though she can't get pregnant from her husband. But the strange thing about this story is that it's actually a virgin birth rather than a virginal conception. So a virginal conception is in the New Testament. That's when in Luke and Matthew, she conceives without having sex. But that's different from a virgin birth. A virgin birth is if she gives birth and her hymen hasn't broken in the process of giving birth. The hymen breaks because the baby comes through the birth canal.
Right.
And in the Proto-Gospel of James, a midwife gives her an internal exam. Mary, this is a legend, gives her an internal exam to see whether her hymen is broken. And it has not. And so now it's not just a virginal conception, it's a virginal birth. And as theologians started thinking more about it, they realized she must not have only conceived as a virgin and given birth as a virgin, she must have been a perpetual virgin. And so then you later get the idea of the perpetual virginity, or she never had sex.
Right.
And then after that, you come up with the idea she never even had a sin nature. And so the idea of the Immaculate Conception connected with property rights. And so already in the Old Testament, the problem with a woman committing adultery is that, so a married woman has sex with another man. The problem is this other man has taken the husband's property rights.
Oh, okay. I see.
And so that's why in the 10 Commandments, it says you shall not covet your neighbor's house, his wife, his donkey, his axe, his ox. So the wife is right up there with the donkey as one of the guy's properties. And so it's a property issue, but it still takes it far more seriously than we do.
Today I'm going to make...
You think that Jesus was a real historical person, right?
Yes.
And there are people you've debated that think that he's not.
Yes.
What is the argument to him not being a real historical figure?
Good question. What good argument?
Yeah, what's the best argument you've heard?
Well, if I were arguing that case, I would say, I guess, I mean, you're saying it's the best argument is kind of like it's a very low bar.
Right.
It's yeah, best.
Understood.
Yeah, okay, what's my best round of golf? I mean, it's like, well, okay, it's like, I think what gives some people pause, not so much. Yeah. Okay. What would give people pause is that we don't have any eyewitness accounts to Jesus. Mm-hmm. We have records that are from probably 40 to 60 years later. Our first author who mentions Jesus is the Apostle Paul, and he's writing in the 50s. Jesus died around the year 30. So the first time we have Jesus mentioned in any source is about 20 years after his death.
Do we know when that drawing was done with the donkey head on the cross, the guy with the head of an ass on the cross?
Yeah, that's later. That's in the second or third.
Oh, it's later.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's a much debated thing. People say they know what it is, but in fact, it's debated among experts what it actually represents. It's clearly Jesus on the cross with a donkey's head.
Yeah,
and a graffiti next to it. But no, it's much later. So the first reference to Jesus at all our first Christian writing is the book of 1 Thessalonians. Mm-hmm. And it's usually dated to the year 49 or 50. Mm-hmm. Jesus died around the year 30. So it's about 20 years later. So the argument would be that we don't have any eyewitness reports, or we don't have any, things that are really close to the Gospels. The first Gospel is written around the year 70. So that's 40 years later. Mm-hmm. So why should we think he really lived? That's kind of the argument. Mm-hmm. It's not a good argument, but it's an argument.
Right. And it is crazy too. I mean, that goes with a lot of historical figures. Like I think Moses is one. Moses wasn't written about until 1,000 years after he supposedly died.
Yeah. Well, 30 years is very different from 1,000 years.
Yes. Very different.
So when Paul's writing, there were people alive who knew Jesus.
Right.
And Paul knows some of them.
So it's a much better case for Jesus than Moses.
I mean, Paul knows his brother.
Right.
Paul personally knew Jesus' brother. So, I mean, if Jesus didn't exist, you'd think his brother would know it.
Mhm.
That's a joke. Moses is a whole different thing. I mean, so if Moses lived, Moses would have probably lived in the 13th century BCE.
Mhm.
And it's not clear if we have any sources that mention him for centuries.
Right.
So that's a different thing from somebody talking about him who knows his brother.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, totally. I mean, then the claims when it gets into him being divine and
Well, that's a different story.
doing all these things and being able to, that's the whole thing. Which I read recently, this fascinating book that really gave me a really good understanding of everything, which was Thomas Paine. I forget the name of his. I think it was The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine.
Yeah, no, it's a classic.
Oh my God, it was such a good book.
Yeah. No, these Thomas Paine is a very important figure for like the history of biblical scholarship. He wasn't a biblical scholar himself,
right? And the ability to discover God in the first place, because it's impossible. Like, we didn't come from nothing, right? We go backwards in time. Like, I came from my parents came from their parents. Like, things don't just appear out of thin air. So it is just by us being as intelligent as we are, we have to understand that we can't appear out of thin air. There has to be some sort of higher power.
We don't have the original manuscripts of the New Testament. They all disappeared within a century, I'm pretty convinced, by copying and copying and copying. Frequent handling. The early church was far more concerned to get the gospel out than they were to do exact copying of the New Testament. And that actually is a blessing, because they didn't have those kinds of controls. And consequently, you get copies that are not through just one stream, but tons of people all over the place.
So, guys, I already have an objection to it when they're talking about early church, since there are no consensus between over thousands of sects of Christianity that who was the leader of the church, who formed the church in Rome, who was in charge of church in Jerusalem. And when they say early church was more concerned about getting the gospel out, I think all the people were facing persecution. So I don't know if they were in hiding, if they were just preaching from their mouth, because a lot of people couldn't read or write. So these things of considering something with a Christian lens and believing that early church was more into spreading the word and the gospel is actually translated into biblical manuscripts, or even a papyrus, or a scroll if you could afford one. That is totally insane. And this is where you need to put the Christian lens out and walk into the situation with an open mind, and let your mind decide what's going to happen when people are facing persecution. And for them, even uh, people were persecuted, I would say 107, 100, 155, 80, or common era, whatever you want to refer to. So these things of, and the second thing is, when these things are such extensively being copied, who are you giving these things to? Are they reliable? What are those people? Are they not going to put their own definitions into it? Are they not going to take one stuff out, one line out, redact something? All these things need to be in light. If you have it, I know you don't, to rely on gospel as being 100% authentic.
Place are making these copies. So here's a man who lives in Corinth. He's going to be visiting Rome, and he says, "Hey, I heard Paul wrote a letter to you guys too. I want to write that out. Do you mind if I copy it when I get there?" Sure, that's no problem. This happened, I'm sure, dozens and dozens of times over. And those manuscripts would have lasted as much as 80, 90 years, but would have fallen apart from all these copies being made. So we don't have the originals. They disappeared. And all the copies that we have disagree with each other at some point. Sometimes it's quite a few disagreements, but we have.
So here he admits that Bible has contradictions right from the earliest manuscript, which is exactly why you cannot rely on, I would say, especially the Gospel of John. Yeah, that's your religion, Christianity.
Hundreds of thousands of textual variants among our manuscripts. So a question to ask here is, how badly did the scribes corrupt the New Testament? It's absolutely proven that they did. No two manuscripts are alike. So unless one of them is pristine, every single scribe made mistakes. So because the original manuscripts disappeared, and because no two copies agree with each other completely, we have to do textual criticism. We can't just rely on one. It's imperfect. So scholars.
And this is the reason, guys, why we don't prefer relying 100% of our faith on Gospels, where it is said to have believed that Jesus claimed divinity. It's not even clear from there. Uh, However, you need to have an open mind about the religion which the book which says that the book is from God, the book is uncorrupted, and the book provides you to challenge itself, which unfortunately a lot of Christians are not willing to do.
Don't we have the original New Testament anymore? Well, the answer to that is no. All 27 books of the New Testament were sent out as documents to others, usually letters. And once they were dispatched, that's the original. Once it gets there, they start making copies, and they would make copies of copies, but they would also make people would come maybe 100 years later and say, do you still have the original Paul's letter to the Romans? Yes, we have most of it, but most of it's fallen apart, or some of it's fallen apart, so you can write that out, and we have a good copy that has all the words, which may have mistakes in it. And so people copied the text so frequently because they valued the words of Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that they wore out these papyrus manuscripts. We don't have the originals anymore. They all disappeared within a century of the writing. Don't we have the original New Testament anymore? Well, the answer to that is no. All 27 books of the New Testament were sent out as documents to others, usually letters. And once they were dispatched, that's the original. Once it gets there, they start making copies, and they would make copies of copies, but they would also make people would come maybe 100 years later and say, do you still have the original Paul's letter to the Romans? Yes, we have most of it, but most of it's fallen apart, or some of it's fallen apart, so you can write that out, and we have a good copy that has all the words, which may have mistakes in it. And so people copied the text so frequently because they valued the words of Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that they wore out these papyrus manuscripts. We don't have the originals anymore. They all disappeared within a century of the writing.
So, guys, this is another hard fact and a proven problem with Christianity. And you have to understand that the people coming into the religion, or people coming in to ask for these copies, who recently converted or sent by church or any town from east, west, north, or south, they were either pagans or mostly Greco-Roman Jewish Greco-Roman people, and very little Jews except from the beginning. So these people already had those man God, man is this, man is that kind of Zeus and Hermes kind of ideas. So those people, when he says that most of the letter of Paul was gone, and some parts were there, some parts were here. So we don't know what the missing parts people said. So let's say you're reading a 3-page book or a letter to someone, and one of the page is gone. So how do you connect page 1 to page 3? You're going to insert your own story, and you're going to think what happened there. Now, the most common reply from Christian scholars is that despite having 5,000 to 9,000 manuscripts or different copies of Bible, only 1 or 2% of them are different. But the basic Christian theology does not move. It doesn't matter how many manuscripts and different copies of the original New Testament they have or not. But the point is that even with that, the the way they're treating it is after Nicaea. So somewhere between 330 to 350, when, according to me, the Emperor of Rome would have had resources and financial backup to make 50 or 60 copies of Bible and spread it out around the kingdom. And from there onwards, because Rome was super advanced for its time and had resources, that those were the things, and there were systems set in place for people to make copies and keep it intact and respect the emperor's copy, so to speak. But even to generate, people would have known that generating 50 or 60 manuscripts of entire Bible under a religious scholar, those would have required a lot of time. They're brilliantly written. The writing is really good. So people would have known that such kind of work is like a construction project of having a subway tunnel being built in your city. People would know about it because the construction goes on for 5, 6 years. So people respect it. And that's what happened after that. That's why when you have different manuscripts, because of someone's writing a certain way, or someone's writing in all capital, or someone has a cursive handwriting, there are some differences, but obviously those are majority of them are going to agree with each other. So that's the thing with that. I am quickly going to remove this from here, and was going to discuss something about biblical words. It's going to remove this. Sorry, guys, I have to take this call. I'll be right back in the afternoon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.